The words, sharp and cold as a shard of glass, cut through the warm, yeasty air of the bakery. It's waste art, inefficient garbage. Kevin Finch, all of 28 years old with a business degree and the confidence of a king, lifted the heavy earthenware crock. Before Art Kowalski, could even protest, Kevin upended it over the large trash bin. The living, breathing heart of the bakery, a sourdough starter Art had nurtured for 40 years, a direct descendant of the one his own father had brought from Poland, slid out in a pale, goopy cascade, disappearing under coffee grounds and discarded paper. "Your time is over, Art," Kevin said, wiping his hands as if he'd just cleaned something dirty. "We're a business, not a museum." For 62-year-old Art, that starter was his world. It was the soul of Kowalski's hearth, a landmark in the Bloomfield neighborhood of Pittsburgh. His hands, gnarled and permanently dusted with a fine layer of flour, knew its every mood. They could feel when it was hungry, when it was sleepy, when it was ready to perform its magic. That starter wasn't just yeast and flour. It was the taste of home for 3 generations of families. It was the Sunday morning toast, the sandwich bread for school lunches, the crusty loaf that soaked up the gravy at holiday dinners. It was the smell of his father's pride and the anchor of his own life's work. When Kevin, the grandson of the original owner who had hired Art as a boy, took over after his grandfather's passing, he brought with him spreadsheets and buzzwords. He spoke of maximizing profit margins and streamlining production. To Kevin, Art's slow, deliberate process was an ancient relic, a bottleneck in his vision of a modern, efficient bakery. The consequences of that single brutal act rippled through the following weeks. The soul of the bakery was gone, replaced by commercial, fast-acting yeast and pre-made mixes that arrived in sterile plastic bags. The deep, complex aroma that used to spill onto the street was replaced by a flat, vaguely sweet smell that lacked character. Art's hours were cut. He was moved from the main ovens to bagging pastries, his master's hands relegated to folding paper. He felt invisible, a ghost in the place he had helped build. The young new hires, who Kevin had brought in, looked at Art with a mixture of pity and condescension. They were taught to measure powders and press buttons on automated proofing machines. They didn't understand the language of the dough, the patient conversation between baker and bread. Regular customers began to hesitate at the counter. "It's different now," an old woman, Mrs. DeLucas, said one morning, prodding a suspiciously uniform-looking loaf. "It doesn't have the same heart." Art, standing nearby, felt each word like a physical blow. His heart was what they had tasted, and it had been thrown in the trash. Then came the biggest order in the bakery's history. The prestigious Pittsburgh Arts Festival wanted Kowalski's Hearth to be the sole supplier of artisan bread for their massive 3-day gala. It was a chance to put the bakery on the city map, a dream come true for Kevin's ambitious plans. He saw it as the ultimate validation of his new methods. He personally designed the recipe for the signature loaf, a quick-rise rosemary olive ciabatta, using the most expensive commercial additives to guarantee a fast, reliable result. 2,000 loaves. The contract was ironclad, the deadline absolute. The night before the first delivery, the bakery was a hive of frantic, forced activity. But something was wrong. Terribly wrong. The dough, engineered for speed, refused to cooperate under the massive volume. It was dense, refusing to rise properly in the proofers. The first test batches came out of the oven like pale, hard bricks. They were inedible. Panic began to creep into Kevin's eyes as batch after batch failed. It was 10 p.m. The first delivery truck was scheduled for 6 a.m. Reputation and a significant amount of money was on the line. The young bakers looked at each other, helpless. Their button-pushing skills were useless against a fundamental failure of chemistry and craft. The business, the one that was not a museum, was on the brink of a very public, very humiliating collapse. Swallowing a pride that was now choking him, Kevin made the call. Art's phone rang,
jarring him from a restless sleep. He listened silently to Kevin's stammering, desperate explanation. He could have said no. Every fiber of his wounded pride screamed at him to hang up and let the arrogant boy drown in his own failure. But then he thought of the bakery's name. He thought of old Mr. Finch, who had given him a chance. He thought of Mrs. DeLuca's disappointed face. It wasn't about Kevin. It was about the hearth. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Art said, his voice steady. He arrived to a scene of chaos and despair. Without a word, he went to a small, cool corner of the pantry and pulled out a small, unassuming jar. His emergency reserve. A piece of the mother's starter he had secretly saved just in case. He fed it with warm water and fresh flour, talking to it in low, gentle Polish. He worked not with frantic energy, but with the calm, focused grace of a master. His hands moved with an economy of motion that was mesmerizing. He didn't measure with scales, but with feel. He could sense the gluten developing, the exact moment the dough was ready to rest. The air began to change, the sterile smell replaced by the rich, tangy life of true fermentation. He worked through the night, a silent maestro conducting a symphony of flour, water, and time. The young staff watched, spellbound, as if witnessing a forgotten magic. As the first loaves came out of the oven just as the sun began to rise, the entire room filled with a glorious crackling sound and an aroma so profound it felt like a prayer. The crust was a deep, burnished gold, the crumb open and airy. It was perfect. The bread was an overwhelming success. Festival goers raved about it. Food critics tweeted pictures asking who the master baker was behind this incredible creation. The bakery's reputation wasn't just saved, it was elevated to legendary status overnight. That evening, after the last delivery was sent, Kevin found Art quietly sweeping the floor, as if he had just finished a normal shift. The young man's face was pale, his arrogance stripped away, leaving only a raw, humbled vulnerability. "Art," he began, his voice barely a whisper, they said it was the best bread they've ever tasted." Art simply nodded, continuing his sweeping. "I was wrong," I finally choked out, the words painful and liberating. I was so wrong. I disrespected you, and I disrespected everything this place stands for. I'm so sorry." He looked at the old baker's hands. "Please, would you teach me? I don't want to run a museum. I want to learn how to make bread with a heart." Art stopped sweeping. He looked at the young man and saw not an enemy, but a boy who had been afraid of failing his grandfather's legacy. He gave a small, slow nod. "First lesson," Art said, his voice soft but firm. "Good things, they take time." In that quiet moment, a new chapter began for Kowalski's Hearth. It became a place where tradition and innovation learned to dance, where the wisdom of age guided the energy of youth. It reminds us all that true value in our work, in our character, and in each other can't always be measured on a spreadsheet. Some things, like good bread and true dignity, are timeless, their worth proven not by speed, but by the soul poured into them. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to our channel for more tales that celebrate the human spirit. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and take care.